right. Good morning to you, my brothers and sisters. It's a marvelous time to be alive and in the kingdom. We are here this morning. There is no morning cardio this morning. We are here and we're going to talk about narcissistic people and narcissistic leaders and so forth and so on. I'm excited about today's conversation. All right, and I am here to just talk about narcissism and the effects of narcissism and what do we do to get over narcissism and narcissistic people. And so in this conversation, I must share our disclaimer. This Facebook Live does not reflect the life of anyone that I know personally. We do not use this platform to condemn, tear down, or undermine any pastors, businesses, or fellow community leaders. We use this platform as an opportunity to share truths and concepts on selected subjects that have been chosen for today. This Facebook Live has been paid for by the experiences that have made me a better me. All right, now, as you come into this space with me this morning, you have the opportunity to take advantage of the comment section, hearts and likes on the screen. That gives you an opportunity to communicate in real time with us this morning. And so narcissism is the topic for today because there are more people that experience narcissism or come into contact with narcissistic people than those that are willing to admit it. And so because we don't know many times the effects of narcissism, we become ignorant to the reality of how potent and powerful narcissism is. I will say to you today, if you don't know anyone that is narcissistic, I will tell you to keep living. It's only a matter of time before you come into contact with someone that is narcissistic, or truthfully, you become narcissistic yourself. Narcissism is something that is plaguing our society, and I like to call it a modern day epidemic. And I know I am using that word flagrantly, the word epidemic flagrantly, but truthfully, narcissism is in so many components of leadership, romantic relationships, church relationships, friendships. Narcissism is with children. Narcissism is in so many different aspects of life that it is becoming common, and people are choosing to ignore the potency of narcissistic behavior. Now, there are some truths that I need to establish on the front end of this conversation, that if you understand narcissism, you must also realize you do not have the capacity to fix a narcissist. You do not have the capacity to help a narcissist change from his or her ways. Narcissism is not gender driven. It is not an issue of one gender versus the other. Narcissism is a product or a byproduct of wounded people that have never been healed. And so they use the plight of being wounded without necessarily acknowledging their wounds or acknowledging their trauma, but it's because of past pain, things that they've experienced in their relationships that they have created a barrier that they use to hurt other people. Have you ever heard the terminology hurt people hurt people. Well, when you talk about narcissistic people, in a general definition of narcissism, is that a narcissistic person will act generous, will be kind, but they lack empathy. And what happens with narcissism is that narcissism not only affects you emotionally, but it can also affect you psychologically. All right, have you ever been connected to any person in your life, whether they're family, friends, enemies, no matter what their level of relationship is with you? Have you been connected with anyone? And anytime something happens, you are the problem. Anytime something goes wrong, it's either something you didn't do, something you did do, something you should have done, something you could have done better. But it's never the problem of anyone else. See, what happens with narcissism? Narcissism has a way of blaming you for the problem, but remaining connected to you because you're not the problem. Do you hear how conflicting that is? All right, narcissism. All right, they will blame you for the problem, but remain connected to you because you're not the problem. And so what happens with narcissism is that there are many people that become contaminated because they don't establish boundaries with narcissistic people in order to protect their sanity. So they end up having a deep love or a deep affection for narcissistic people, and they assume that they have capacity within themselves to make a narcissistic person better. And a narcissistic person cannot heal or become better until he or she or they until they realize the destruction of their own patterns. And so sometimes you have to create distance in order for a narcissistic person to find themselves. You can't always be accessible. You can't always be, accessible is just the best word. Because narcissistic people are controlling. Narcissistic people are possessive. Narcissistic people are demanding. And many times the demand that narcissistic people require is all attention on them. Have you ever had a conversation with anyone that is narcissistic, and let's say that you're talking about you hurt your elbow, you hurt your elbow, all right? And the narcissistic person will end up talking about how they hurt their elbow and how their elbow pain is worse than your pain, and that you have not had an elbow pain like their pain because they have the greatest elbow pain ever. All right. And so with narcissistic people, they always put the attention on themselves. And therefore, that when we talk about narcissism as it relates to leadership, that we're living in a day and a time where narcissistic leadership is at an all-time high. Now, I'm not going to use this Facebook Live to name various personalities that people are common with knowing, because it would be unfair to name personalities that are common in people's knowledge bank and ignore the reality that the person listening can be narcissistic themselves. See, narcissism don't happen with personality. That regardless of your income bracket, regardless of your leadership capacity, narcissism is something that affects the individual, and the individual cannot be better if he or she is not willing to do the internal work that's necessary for them to be better for themselves. So narcissism, all right, this is one of those things that it becomes very difficult. Difficult because narcissism is a personality disorder. It's not an emotional defect. It's a personality disorder. And narcissistic people can camouflage who they really are. And you, most of the time, will not know if the person is narcissistic until you make them upset, until you do something that they don't agree with, until you say something that doesn't make them happy. At that moment, oh boy, it can become triggers where you're able to identify the depth of narcissistic ways that the individual have. That's why when we talk about narcissism in leadership, that yes, you can have a leader that has been successful, and they still be narcissistic. Yes, you can be romantically involved with someone that is successful. They are doing well with their career, that they are amazing, and they are narcissistic. Yes, you can have a preacher that preaches the gospel, and he or she or they can be narcissistic. Narcissism is one of those things that you got to understand how it works. Okay, all right. Narcissism works best at having control. Narcissistic people don't usually share. And when they share, there is a expectation or like a deal that comes with whatever they are giving. See, narcissistic people are so controlling that if you ever try to break a relationship with a narcissistic person, they'll blame you. They'll attack you. They will do some amazing things to make you feel like you are the one that is wrong for breaking a relationship with them. And they will do their best at trying to punish you emotionally and psychologically. And what happens is that many times they will not change that attack towards you until they find someone else that they can attack. So what you do when you're dealing with narcissistic people is that you have to give yourself space to be whole and space to be healed. Now, family members can be narcissistic. Children can be narcissistic. Narcissism does not come with an age. Narcissism is a disorder, and it's to your interest that you be able to identify narcissism when it happens or when it is happening. Now, I know some of you are going to be listening, and some of you are going to say to yourself, well, I need to let the person know that they are narcissistic. Well, I want to go ahead and tell you, the moment that you tell the person that they are narcissistic, 9 times out of 10, they're going to act out of character. 9 times out of 10, they are going to just do some extreme things. 9 times out of 10, the moment that you acknowledge that that person is narcissistic to their face, they could attack you emotionally. They could attack you verbally. They could attack you psychologically. See, the idea about you recognizing that someone is narcissistic is first so you can protect yourself, because narcissism is contagious. If you hang around a person that is narcissistic for long periods of time, regardless of how you say to yourself, you don't like narcissistic people, but if you continue to hang around narcissistic people for long periods of time, because narcissism is contagious, you will end up picking up narcissistic tendencies. Unknowingly, you will pick up narcissistic tendencies. And so what you want to do is understand what is going on with narcissism. See, a narcissist has an exaggerated sense of self-importance. See, when you start dealing with narcissistic people, it's all about them. It's never about us. See, the old African proverb says, We are because I am, and I am because we are. But narcissistic people never see we. They see I. Narcissistic people never see us. They see me. Narcissistic people never see ours. They see mine. Narcissistic people are not concerned about the outside world. Narcissistic people are only concerned about themselves. Now, are narcissistic people bad people? The answer is no. They just have a disorder that you must be able to acknowledge so that you're not manipulated, controlled, or deceived by the disorder that they may be portraying. See, narcissism shows up in many different forms. Narcissistic people sometimes think that they are the only one. They have this extreme sense of self, and they assume that they are the only one. And yes, we all are different people. All of us are different individuals. However, there is a commonality amongst all of us being human beings, that we are different and unique in and of our own being. However, we're not so different and unique that we are like an alien to society. Narcissistic people have an extreme sense of self, and they really think that they are the only one. And so when we start looking at leadership, that narcissistic people in leadership also think that they are just the only one. That it's their organization, it's their company, that it is only what they have going on what makes the world go round. Narcissistic people are really engaged with who they are, and the danger that we encounter with narcissistic people is that if you yourself don't have a sense of self, you can become controlled by narcissistic people. Now, I know you're going to tell me this morning, well, I'm not controlled by anyone. I have my own mind. I do my own thing. Well, let me tell you, narcissistic people have a need to be needed. And what happens is every one of us, we have a low sense of need to be needed. Narcissistic people have a high sense of need to be needed. Do you understand the difference of what I'm sharing with you right now? Okay? Narcissistic people have a high sense of need to be needed. So they'll build their value in your life based on what they can do for you or what they think they're doing for you. All right? But the whole goal is that the motive behind what they do for you is because of something that they want from you. And narcissistic people will hold you in that triangle and have you emotionally unstable and psychologically dependent on their existence because they've robbed you from your independency. Now, some more things about narcissistic people. Narcissistic people always need you to acknowledge them. Narcissistic people always need some high level of admiration. How beautiful am I? How good did I do? How well am I? They need some extreme proportion of affirmations given unto them. Now, here's the thing. When you understand that you're in contact or communication with narcissistic people, if you're going to save yourself, you cannot always give narcissistic people what they're asking for. Because the moment that you can give in to narcissistic people and you begin to give them everything that they're asking for, it is an emotional trap for you. And you're going to end up in an emotional prison, depleted, and feeling exploited, because you're going to be wanting the narcissistic person to give something back to you, and a narcissistic person do not have the emotional capacity to give back to you what you're giving to them. So you would be unreasonable in expecting a narcissistic person to give to you what they don't have the emotional space to give. So here lies the problem with society. Society, because people have identity crisis, people suffer from low self-esteem, people lack personal affirmation, that they tend to have an extreme need of admiration. And with that, they become narcissistic over a period of time in their behavior, never knowing that they are narcissistic. Some more things about narcissistic people. Narcissistic people have a sense of entitlement. When you start looking at narcissism in its best form, is that you must realize that the world is framed because we share. We share. There's an exchange. There's an exchange. Narcissistic people never have an exchange. Narcissistic people think that they are entitled to the world's best without working for the world's best. And narcissistic people think that it is owed to them for them to live their best life. Has anybody ever told you that the dictators of the world, that in order to become a dictator, you must be narcissistic? Now, the question is, all right, do you know anybody that is in your family that work with you, that you go to church with? Do you know anybody? Or maybe you. I hate to say married to one, but yes, you can be married to a narcissistic person. Are you dating someone that is narcissistic? Have you ever found yourself in a place where the whole relationship is about them? It's not about you or you all as a couple. It's about how it makes them look. Narcissistic people don't care about others. They care about themselves. They do not have the capacity to have empathy. You understand do you understand what I'm trying to tell you this morning? That when you're dealing with a narcissistic person, they don't have the emotional space to understand how you feel. So you would endanger yourself if you would endanger yourself if you are expecting a narcissistic person to understand where you are coming from, to understand where your starting point is, to understand where you are emotionally. And a narcissistic person do not have the emotional capacity to understand where you're coming from. What happens the moment you state where you're coming from, how you feel, where you're going, the narcissistic person, they only have emotional space to compare. They don't have the emotional capacity to understand. And quite frankly, narcissistic people don't want to understand, because life is about them, not about you. Oh, I know this is a different kind of conversation today, but listen, we have to talk about things, because people walk around becoming wounded by things that are obvious in the earth, and they don't have conversations around these things. Okay? All right. Now, narcissistic people will actually be jealous of you and not tell you that they're jealous of you. So, I wish I had a sanctified church that was talking back to me this morning. Did you hear what I tell you? A narcissistic person will be jealous of you / envious, but they won't tell you that they're jealous of you. Well, that's why they have to have control. That's why they have to have dominance. See, when you start dealing with narcissism in and of itself, narcissism is a condition of an individual, but you cannot heal them from that. let me tell you some more things. Narcissistic people are arrogant. Okay? Now, the arrogance, let me be fair to narcissistic people. Everybody got some level of pride. Narcissistic people have an extreme level of pride. Everybody has some sense of arrogance. Narcissistic people have an extreme sense of arrogance. See, now, I know that you're going to say to me this morning, well, I'm not arrogant. Well, before you refute what I am sharing with you, I want you to consider this one thing. So when you stand in the mirror and you tell yourself you look good today, what do you call that? Okay, let's say you painted your home and you drove in the neighborhood and you said, my home looks good. What do you call that? When you go purchase your vehicle and you like the amenities of the vehicle and the way it makes you feel, what do you call that? Well, I'm here to tell you that is what I coined to be low-level arrogance. That in order to feel good about something, that you must have at least a low level of arrogance. It's okay. Narcissistic people have an extreme level of arrogance. It's extreme. And so when you try to correct a narcissistic person, that is problematic because narcissistic people do not want correction. Narcissistic people will not learn from anyone that they consider to be equal or lesser than them. Narcissistic people desire to be the smartest person in the room. A narcissistic person desires to be the only one in a world where there's billions of people. Narcissistic people don't have the fortitude to respect someone else's intelligence. Narcissistic people build their presence around their presence. It's about them. Now, as we continue to talk about narcissism, you're going to find some people that say, well, I'm not narcissistic. See, narcissistic people try to evade the reality of life. They try to evade the reality of life by always projecting that they're thinking about success. And they only want to deal with people that's going to make them successful, whatever that is defined by in the mind of the narcissistic person. And they will be shrewd and they will be harsh against others because they will make themselves the center of attention. And they will also make it where they're the only ones getting attention. Now, you're going to find narcissism in various areas of life. And it is up to you to be able to recognize when narcissism is present. Because if you don't ever recognize when narcissism is present, then you could potentially find yourself between a rock and a hard place. Because narcissistic people will take advantage of you. This is not a probability. I'm telling you that they will. Because it's in their nature to take advantage of everything that's weaker. It's in their nature to take advantage of anything that is lesser. It's in their advantage. It's in their nature to also sabotage and tear down any threats that are around them. Narcissistic people do not play fair. Narcissistic people, they play with an intent to destroy. Anything that's going to hinder the attention that they may get, they seek to destroy it. And again, narcissism isn't one of those things that happen because of a race of people. No, narcissism is the sickness that a person endures through traumatic experiences that they've encountered over life. I could go through some examples, but I am trying to be more general today with this conversation on narcissism, so that you can be more apt to taking care of yourself rather than trying to take care of everybody else. See, you got to understand what narcissism is. Some of the greatest challenges for healthy people is when they are in love with a narcissist, when they are infatuated by a narcissist, when their loyalty overrides the reality of what's going on. And so narcissistic people can control your entire life and your entire being. And when you realize that you are a fully grown adult, you'll understand that no one should have that much control over you. Because narcissism is a thing that happens with people that are not well. Yes, I am disappointed that narcissism is in the church, but that hasn't just started. Narcissism has been in the church since the inception of the church. There's no new news. Narcissism is in religion. As a matter of fact, because I have some friends that are Muslim, you do know that extreme Muslims, that they are narcissistic. So like extreme in anything, you'll find that these people are narcissists. Extreme racist people, they're narcissistic. And being racist doesn't go in one direction. It goes in multiple directions. But that narcissism does that. Looking for superiority, narcissism does that. And so, as you consider this subject matter today, I want you to think about narcissism. How have you been affected? Are you being affected right now? Do you have the ability to make decisions on your own? Or have your ability to decide, has it already been robbed or taken from you? We must have conversations around narcissism. And I would like to say that there are too many black and brown communities that do not have enough conversations around narcissism or gaslighting. These become taboo topics that we don't really talk about. And if we are Christian, we would much more rather just quote 2 to 3 scriptures and assume that that is how we address narcissism. You cannot address narcissism with the Bible, because narcissistic people know Bible too. So I want you to be well, and I want you to be better, and I want you to be healthy, and I want you to decree and declare that you are whole. Doing that, be mindful of how you engage with narcissistic people. Make sure you spend the time to protect yourself before you try to protect them. Something to think about.